Welcome to Mexico City and to this building. I'll tell you a bit more about it. I first want to thank the whole network, Benedict, of course, all the work behind the occasion, Miros and Marielena, and we're really chuffed to have you with us, Patrick, and I also want to greet Nora Gross online. We also need to be punctual because we have a pretty substantial online following, which is both live and the recordings will remain so people can keep on learning from all of you people in time. So I want to welcome you to this really amazing building and an even more amazing history behind the building. This building is an 18th century building, mid 18th century, but in fact the Colegio, which is the college of San Ildefonso, is one of the very, very first colleges in the whole of the American continent, at least in the sense we understand colleges. Of course, there were centers of learning way before that, but this was one of the first that the Spaniards, inhabitants of this land after the conquest, which is a complex and difficult affair, as we know. I say it's complex because the conquest was also made possible by alliances that the Spaniards made with local so-called Indian groups, originary inhabitants of these lands. So it's a very complex history that we face in thinking about all of this. But really, it must be one of the first 5 colleges established, certainly in Mexico City, and therefore throughout the Americas. So it was established by the Jesuits in the 1580s. They were faced with really very overwhelming questions about how to go about their plans and their thoughts, their positions, while Tenochtitlan, the old Aztec capital, was still smoking after fires that were still active at the time. And you know quite a lot about Jesuits, no doubt. So they established this center of learning, and they established a very important library, which was attended by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz later, a very important intellectual, very significant, being a powerful poet, woman poet in the 17th century. Then, of course, the Jesuits were expelled from the Americas by the King of Spain. They had too much power, and the library sort of was plundered, and this building, of course, had been built by then. The original building was an earlier one, which doesn't stand anymore, and then it became a very important, emblematic place. For you to get an idea, I don't think there's any aspect of the history of Mexico that does not have, one way or another, a relation with this building. It was the centerpiece of the reform movement by our first indigenous Mexican president Benito Juárez, and this was the first secular school, and it was sort of the flagship of his secular educational movement in the 19th century. And then from then on, you have these generations of positivists and anti-positivists. Then it was the sort of the base for the intellectuals of the Mexican Revolution. This is the very first place in the continent where the hammer and the sickle was painted on a public, visible surface in one of the murals. And the murals you see, these are the very, very first murals ever. So these are murals without muralism. This was a bunch of 20-year-olds painting on the walls of a 18th century building. So that sort of describes the radical character of their intervention at the time. And then the history goes on and on until 1968. There was a very powerful Mexican students movement, and there was a famous bazooka that's penetrated one of the doors of the building, and there's a set of famous photographs of all of that. And this is also where our national university, UNAM, originated. So the first rector of UNAM was the rector of the Colegio de San Ildefonso before that. So this is quite a place, and we are here because our own institute, 17th Institute of Critical Studies, which is turning 25 this year, and we're celebrating beginning with this colloquium, so we're very happy to host you all on this very special occasion for us. We've celebrated a few events here, and we grew a very significant dialogue with the authorities of Colegio San Ildefonso. This has been a museum for the last 30 years, but of course the history of the Colegio goes back to the 16th century, so 30 years is like nothing. There was a very important exhibition here that was Mexico's sort of representation in a way when Mexico signed NAFTA with the US and Canada, and there was an exhibition which basically said, you know, we have 30 centuries of art here. They go back to, you know, primeval ancient times and all the way to contemporary art. And that exhibition, which was called Esplendores de 30 siglos, Splendors of 30 centuries, was housed in this very building. And the current administration of the Colegio wants to recover the nature of the Colegio as a Colegio. So they are including another set of activities on top of the activities of the museum, including scholarly activities, cultural activities, relations with civil society, and a whole series of projects that have to do with contemporary forms of social economy and so on. And we're very honored to be invited to contribute to that amazing project under the heading of Futures Workshop. So you are in the Futures Workshop, which is a joint project between the Colegio San Ildefonso, 17th Institute of Critical Studies, and two other very important members of the workshop, which is the Cátedra Octavio Paz, which is dedicated to poetry. It's one of the most important chairs to do with poetry in the country, and also Patio Lab, which is the presence of the scientific community in the sense of the the natural sciences of the National University in this very building. So this is an emerging project, and we are really delighted for you to be part of it. You see it has many, many layers, and as we all know, this is a very important time to think about the future and what the future implies in the present and so on. And in a way, if you think of it, San Ildefonso has been a workshop, a futures workshop, since the 16th century. It's always been about imagining the future and what can be done in response to present conditions and so on. So I will try to keep my intervention short. There's always too much to say, but I just want to add, and that's the reason why, si me muestras la pantalla siguiente, Roy, I wanted to briefly show you some images which are really at the origin of the inspiration of this project, 17 Institute of Critical Studies, which was really molded around the figure of the blind photographer. Roy, ¿me escuchas? Si me enseñas la siguiente pantalla, Memo, te agradezco. There it is. So this is online. You can have a look at that later in your time. But this is our contents web, 17.org, 17 as a word, and it's dedicated to blind photographers. That is, blind people who make photographs. And I was very, very taken in the 90s with the figure of a Slovenian blind photographer called Eugen Baučar, who's really the precursor of at least contemporary blind photography. I don't know of any earlier instances, like really dedicated blind people really dedicated to photography and to think about it and so on. So these images you are seeing are his. And of course, this has both direct and indirect relations with eugenics and anti-eugenics mainly. And of course, you can derive a whole aesthetic and an ethic, and I think an epistemology from the figure of the blind photographer, because what he does is work with negativity. In other words, he works precisely with his own impossibility and produces images from his blindness, not in spite of his blindness, but with his blindness. And what we've done over the past 25 years is really take stock of that logic and cultivate it in all aspects of what we do, both content-wise and strategic-wise. Our pedagogy is also inspired by that perspective, and so on. So with Beatriz Miranda-Galarza, we've been working on disability and culture since 2013. Susan Antebi, who's happily present here, took part in a colloquium back in 2013, dedicated to those themes. So it's a groove that we've been concerned with and which you now join and strengthen. So we are particularly honored and delighted that you are meeting precisely in all of these contexts and strengthening our work in those respects. So again, a very warm welcome, and thank you. And I pass on to Beatriz, who's worked on this colloquium together with Benedict. So thank you both, and here it is.
Good morning. I'm going to speak Spanish because Ilse told me that it's not a problem. I feel more comfortable now speaking Spanish. Quiero darles la más cordial bienvenida. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Ha sido un proceso bastante importante también para mí personalmente con Benedict. Este diálogo, ir y venir armando el coloquio. Y pues de pronto tenerlos a todos ustedes aquí, a todas ustedes, ha sido pues en la mañana verlos ya llegar, pues es como materializar este encuentro que lo hemos venido preparando. Yo solamente quiero añadir algo. Este coloquio es muy importante en la medida en que es la primera vez que tenemos un invitado curador. 17 siempre ha tenido desde su origen los coloquios armados exclusivamente por 17, ¿no? Por el instituto. Y esta vez, pues el encuentro con Benedict y las conversaciones que fuimos teniendo, pues al final arribaron a que es necesario que la red tuviera el proceso de curaduría, y por eso inventamos esta figura del comentador y comentadora. Porque,
we also created the figure of the commentator, so that's why we have a guest curator this year. Sometimes we thought that it was logical to have someone listening. The network, we have curated all the panels, and we are happy to have people coming from different places and who are going to share experiences, and also that you're going to learn from what we are doing at the institute. You're going to learn from our students, and our students are going to learn from you. So we wanted for you to have the experience of being listened to, and in the face of this listening, that there could be a response. So the commentators, except for a specific case, which is the case of the panel that we organized, we organized a couple of panels devoted to the discussion about leprosy, and also the panel about the right and left and its relationship with eugenics. Those two panels, they're going to have commentators from the network of eugenics, but the rest is, well, people who were invited from 17 institutes in order to make comments. I have the feeling that in Saturday, when we have our plenary session, we will have this flow of learnings, of mutual learning, that is going to flourish, and is going to help the flourishing of small beginnings, but also help flourish 17 Institute. So just telling you that Mexico is right now, well, living the circumstances that we are facing right now. The world is also facing a really hard situation, a critical situation, I must say. But I think that crisis also brings the possibility of hope. So throughout these days, beside the technical problems, beside the schedule issues that we might have, I just ask from you, let's be present, let's remain present, and let's remind that we must strive for hope. This must be a good place, a place for hospitality that can help us to create, to share, and also something important that we need to do right now, because it's so, we need it in the world right now. Also, I want to thank Benedict and other colleagues for Susan and Tevi, along with her, and thanks to her, we made a first colloquium about eugenics. It was an online colloquium, and thanks to Susan, we now have a book that we're going to present later on that's called To Read Eugenics. And thanks to Susan, we also had the possibility of, learn and to meet Benedict and so many other people that are here present. So thank you so much, Susan, for being the listener for 17 Institute. And I also want to tell you that this colloquium is important because we are going to recognize the career of two people in the realm of the disability and disability studies. Relevant for me, relevant for 17 Institute, Patrick Devlieger and Nora Cross. Nora is going to be with us, as you know, she's going to be with us since Friday. Today we had a connection issue, but Nora is going to be present through a call. For us, it's a privilege to have both of them together and contributing with their way of thinking, but also with their experience in life. So welcome, Nora and Patrick. I want to tell you that here we have throughout the rest of the week, because we have the internal colloquium of 17 Institute since Monday, but we have also our students of 17 Institute, students of master's degree, PhD, and post-PhD. 17 Institute usually hosts complex minds, and you are part of this world. Because if you are here, it's because you belong to the world of 17 Institute. This complexity is reflected in the deep understanding and the deep diving that we do on topics that the universities, the general universities, are not usually interested in. So you're going to find students that are working on PhDs or master's degree who are working diverse topics, but also quite human topics. 17 Institute opens this possibility of allowing to connect what's personal with the community reflections, also with theory, with practice. So I invite you, if you are over there and you see a student, come close, start a dialogue, try to exchange, try to make this a place to listen, to learn. That's what we wish you could do, if possible. I want to close my participation without forgetting to thank Miroslava and Benedict. And we usually forget, but I want to thank the team of 17, Roy, Memo, Guillermo, all the team of San Ildefonso who have opened the doors and tell you that this is a space we could not have been doing. We could not be doing something like this in any other place. So these are the murals. Here in San Ildefonso, we have the murals that are going to remind us that we can move forward, that we can come together. So welcome and thank you. Thank you so much, Benedict. Maravilloso.
Benjamín, for
Muchísimas gracias.
the context of where we are and for the context of this moment in time. And thank you, Beatriz, for your introduction, but also for already picking up on this idea of hope. And in my words, I'm also going to sort of come back to this sense of hope, because I do think it's, in a way, it's why we're here. I think we wouldn't be here if we weren't hopeful. But it's also just to see you all coming here today from right across corners of the world. I think it just brings so much hope. So I appreciate you sort of already leading into that. I am going to read my little comments and stuff, so bear with me. But yeah, hello everyone, my name is Benedict Ipgrave, and it is such an honor to be with you today and to continue our dialogue together. Over the past few years, alongside incredible colleagues around the world, I've had the privilege of building the From Small Beginnings project. a global initiative dedicated to uncovering the histories of eugenics, exposing how its legacies continue to shape many of today's crises, and inviting people everywhere to imagine what an anti-eugenic future might look like and how we can achieve it together. At the heart of this work is a simple but powerful goal: to build community around global anti-eugenics work. And when in community together, big things can happen. And that's why today is so exciting, because you have joined us from different parts of the world so that we can be in community with you all. So a big thank you. And I want to begin by expressing deep gratitude to Benjamín, to Beatriz, and to the entire 17 Instituto team for hosting us here in Mexico City, and for the immense work behind the scenes to make this gathering possible. So huge, deep gratitude to you both, and to you all. I also want to express gratitude to my partner in this work, Miroslava Chávez-García from UC Santa Barbara, to our wonderful chairs, Nora Gross, joining somewhere, and to Marielena Hincapié. Thank you for your leadership and vision. And also thank you to Ines, in front of you all, for her huge logistical support in making sure we can all be together in the room today. So thank you, Ines. But above all, I want to thank you all in the audience, scholars, activists, artists, and students from every corner of the world. Your presence here today truly does bring hope in a very, very dark time. And I think that is so important. Today, we'll share the journey of From Small Beginnings, the evolution of this work, and we'll share also our next big step, which we are on the cusp of right now, in the creation of a global anti-eugenics center. My colleague Miros will speak about the inspiring work happening in California, and Nora and Marielena will share their own reflections too. And together we'll explore how this movement is growing and how you all can be a part of shaping its future. So to go a little bit into the journey of From Small Beginnings, this project truly began from small beginnings, like its namesake. It was sparked by student protests at UCL after the shocking revelation, and this is in 2020, that a eugenics conference, the London Conference on Intelligence, had taken place on campus. For those of us working in disability and justice spaces, this was a huge turning point. It exposed how deeply eugenics still lurks beneath the surface of our institutions and societies. We started by organizing conversations across London, quite small in scale, but with 10 different institutions and a year-long program. And then the pandemic hit. Plans were disrupted, but the urgency of these discussions only grew. And during lockdown, we saw dangerous ideologies resurface. Ableist agendas, do not resuscitate scandals, vaccine nationalism. So many of these different ideas were coming back, and coming back strong. And the pandemic revealed inequalities like never before. And then came the murder of George Floyd, a moment that ignited global reckoning with systemic injustice across the world. And in that climate, From Small Beginnings realized its mission was more urgent than ever. In 2021, the centennial of the Second International Eugenics Congress gave us a powerful moment to galvanize global action. What began as a London-based initiative became a worldwide movement. We partnered with artists, and activists across continents, hosting conferences, webinars, and strategy sessions, reaching thousands and inspiring new courses, publications, and institutional reforms. One of those activities we were truly proud of, thanks to the wonderful leadership of Susan Antebe, who has already been thanked but needs to be thanked repeatedly, and the support of 17 Instituto, was in 2021, the Colloquium Legacies of Eugenics in Mexico and the Americas. And we are thrilled to be able to share, as Beatriz touched on, the publication that has come out of those gatherings later today. And this book, To Read Eugenics, will serve as an important guide to this field in Latin America moving forward. Another important intervention in 2022 was a conference which was trilingual in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, exploring the legacies of eugenics across Latin America, where many of these connections were further advanced, and we were able to engage further voices in important anti-eugenic initiatives across the region. And then a further evolution still was in the planning with Pietra Divan, who's wonderful to be here, and colleagues across Brazil of another major conference in Rio in 2024. Unfortunately, due to health circumstances, this gathering had to be postponed. But as is so often the case, the journey was as important as the outcome. And the journey and the community formed around that journey of this Rio conference ended up generating the frameworks and connectivity from which this gathering has arisen. In another country and in another year, but we are thrilled to see the final, to see this finally coming to fruition. A huge thank you to Susan, to Pietra, to Miros, to the 17 Instituto team, and for the many wonderful anti-eugenic scholars, activists, and artists across Latin America and beyond for laying the groundwork across these many years for this gathering here today. But this gathering is more than just a Latin American gathering, it is a global gathering, and what an anti-eugenic work has happened in Latin America has played out in different but equally inspiring ways in different regions right across the world these last few years around these anti-eugenic discussions. And across this next week or so, we are thrilled to connect with and learn from all these regional anti-eugenic interventions and global anti-eugenic community. I mentioned you're all bringing hope to these discussions, and why exactly does hope matter around this work? I think because eugenics sought to erase hope by its very design, to deny certain communities a future and thereby their hope. And yet, in this work, we find hope everywhere, in the voices of survivors, in the passion of activists, in gatherings like this one today. Yet the resurgence of eugenics today in far-right ideologies, discriminatory policies, and genomic technologies is indeed alarming. But the growing global anti-eugenics community is a reason to believe that change is possible. And that you are all here today is reasons for all of us to be hopeful. Being hopeful of an anti-eugenic future is already a first and perhaps most important antidote to the harms and traumas of eugenics. And being hopeful of what we can achieve together, we are now building a global anti-eugenics center with hubs at UC Santa Barbara, at UCL, and across the global south. This center will provide the infrastructure and connectivity needed to confront eugenics wherever it reemerges, and to design an inclusive, democratic, and hopeful anti-eugenic future. Over the coming week, we invite you to join us, share your insights, your stories, your vision of an anti-eugenic future. And when we will end this colloquium with that question of what exactly an anti-eugenic future looks like, and what reasons are there for being hopeful in achieving such a future, we are all here very much to listen to you all. The urgency of this work is unprecedented, but this gathering and this community that has been generated already reminds us we are not powerless. Together, we can build a future rooted in justice, in dignity, and above all, in hope. Thank you, and I look forward to learning from all of you as we take this journey forward together. I'm now going to hand over to Miros, who will talk to us.
Buenos dias, good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Benedict, for sharing such an inspiring story of how this collective work has come together. As you stated, this gathering would not be possible without all of the people and their passion for equity and social justice for some of the most vulnerable members of society. I am honored to be a part of this amazing and inspiring group. I first came to this community through my own research interests in the history of eugenics in California and its impact on boys of color, on Mexican and Black boys in particular, and communities of color more generally, on Latinas in Los Angeles in the 1970s. Working with my fellow colleagues, Benedict, Alexandra Stern at UCLA, Tony Platt, Susan Schweik, and Marcy Darnovsky from Berkeley, as well as Milton Reynolds from Oakland, who will join us later. Is Milton here? No, I don't see him yet. He's here in Mexico, but he will join us. And my PhD student, Isidro Gonzalez from UC Santa Barbara. We formed a working group. We called ourselves the California Eugenics Legacies, and we're still operating. So we're there. In 2021, we hosted an online conference on California Eugenics Legacies, where we discussed the insidious nature of eugenics in California, Next, we formed a multi-campus working group later that year. And then pandemic or no pandemic, we decided to come together in person in the spring of 2022 to strategize on how to move forward with our work. A central question on our mind was how to strategize around efforts to memorialize, that is, how to recognize and remember and honor the victims of California's state-sponsored sterilization when it's very difficult to get at those individuals, correct? To that end, we hosted a hybrid symposium during the pandemic in Berkeley in early 2023, inviting family and community members directly impacted by sterilization efforts to join us in thinking about strategies for, I say proper memorials, but for memorials, creating memorials. Stacy Cordova, who's here today, among many others, provided others for family stories of pain and suffering, but also resilience. Throughout this work, we at UC Santa Barbara collaborated from Small Beginnings and the Center for Genetics and Society at Berkeley. We participated in the Latin American Eugenics Conference, hosting the webinar across a trilingual platform, learning how to manage between Spanish, English, and Portuguese. That was fun. It was great. With Benedict's invitation, we participated also in the 100-year centennial of the Immigration Act of 1924, the most severe and restrictive piece of legislation up until that time, and still remains a very integral part of this legacy. Marielena Hincapié, who's here, served as an important speaker at that event, so that was very moving. And very few, what was shocking at the time was that very few events actually in the United States marked that 100 years since the 1924 Immigration Act, which is so central. All of this is to say that though it seems like we've done a lot, and we have, I feel like we are just beginning to launch something bigger with all of you today. I look forward to building a collective vision for a global anti-eugenics center. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Miros. Vamos ahora a tener la llamada con Nora. Entonces va a ser
So Nora, she's going to be in WhatsApp. We're going to have a photo, but she's going to be on a WhatsApp call. Hola Nora, pues ya estamos acá
sorry about the
escuchándote.
problem that we have, but here we are listening to you.
Thank you for having me. I will say a few words, and I look forward to joining everyone on Friday. I'm delighted to be here. And I've been listening with great interest to the speakers on the panel, and I'm just so pleased to be part of this effort. Since the late 1970s, so over the course of my career as an anthropologist, I've come across eugenics regularly in a variety of formats, as it has been used and misused to limit the hopes, expectations, and opportunities of any number of groups, people with disabilities, people from ethnic and minority communities. It really limits all societies and all members of society. I have seen eugenics take a number of different avenues and the idea of eugenics be fragmented because it was divided into so many different disciplines: history, medicine, ethnic and minority studies, gender studies, government and policy studies, development studies. And because of this, I think people often overlook the fact that eugenics was still very much an idea that was with us and framing much of popular culture, government rules and regulations, and more recently the social media, which is why I was so interested and excited when Benedict appeared in my office about 5 years ago now to discuss an initiative to bring together this diffuse body of issues, concerns, and research under one overarching umbrella: anti-eugenics. What we need now is to develop a unifying conceptual framework, anti-eugenics, that provides a new and innovative way to bring together a large body of knowledge, research, and policy to address long-standing eugenics assumptions that continues to pervade society, popular culture, and of course, politics. For many years, I think many of us who work in research, arts, advocacy, have made the mistake of assuming that if the term eugenics faded from use in the aftermath of World War II, the ideas, prejudices, and bad science they represent also faded. As the past several years, and particularly the past year, has clearly shown, this is certainly not the case. This bringing together, therefore, of scientists, policymakers, advocates, and artists to synthesize and disseminate existing knowledge and identify where new research and action is needed could not be more timely. A key to what we need to understand is that there's a great deal of complexity involved in the development and spread of eugenics, but what we need is a simple and clear set of messages about the evils of eugenics that can be understood and spread in popular culture, social media, politics, and advocacy to create clear messages that we can all bring together and take action on to address eugenics and to ensure an anti-eugenics future. So let me stop there. Thank you very much for having me, and I'll turn the floor back to you folks.
Thank you so much, Nora. See you on Friday.
Gracias, Beatriz, por esa intervención tecnológica.
Thank you
for
for that technological intervention. Muchas gracias también por el
for
aspecto.
your logistics support for helping us all get here today. My name is Marielena Hincapié. I am an immigrant from Medellin, Colombia, but have grown up in the United States. My father was recruited as a textile worker to Rhode Island, and I'm the youngest of 10 children and have spent the last 3 decades working on migrant justice as a lawyer, as an activist, and frankly, did not know much about eugenics, although it was all around me, and it had shaped everything about my family, our migration, and our experiences, and how we walked around the world. And I believe that that is probably what most people around the world, most people are not conscious of how eugenics has shaped and continues to shape. It may be under different terminology, it may be different words, but that is the importance of all of us coming here together today. I want to thank Benedict, who 2 years ago, reached out to me to invite me to the centennial of the virtual colloquium that was the centennial of the 1924 Immigration Act. At that time, I was doing research at Cornell Law School for a forthcoming book called Becoming America, which is a book about the country's immigration history told through a family story. And as I researched my own family story, not just our family's migration from Colombia, but my extended family who, unbeknownst to me, had people who had come on the Mayflower, people who were coming from Poland, from Russia, Italy, Ireland, etc. I learned about eugenics. I learned about how the way that the eugenics leaders at that time were using their skills, their wealth, their networks, their ability to create a framework that not only was targeting migrants who they deemed to be inferior, but also wanted to force sterilization, wanted African Americans, Black Americans to be deported back to Africa. It is in that research that I realized that we do not have the luxury to continue fighting for any one of our communities. This is a moment for what I call the project of us, for all of us to come together to fight for humanity, right? To fight for Mother Earth, because even eugenics has had an impact on our world, on our universe. And this is the importance of this global initiative to create a global anti-eugenics center, but it's not enough to be anti-eugenics. The work that we have before us right now is to build a vision for all of us to come together and inspire people, especially young people, children who are just growing up today. The students, for all of you who are here, I am most excited and thankful that you have said yes to be here, because that is the seeds that we are planting in this convening, at this colloquium, that the conversations that are happening all over the world, it will really rest in your hands, right? As you continue on and we build a world that is more equitable, that is more just, that is more inclusive for all of us. At this moment in the United States, because it's the place that I currently live in, and where we see radical anti-migrant approaches, anti-refugee, anti-Blackness, anti-women, anti-LGBTQ, you name any community, it is under attack. And that theory of the Great Replacement, right, which is really what we have seen, the resurgence of Great Replacement theories, both in the United States and in Europe, but also throughout the Americas, in Brazil, I think in particular. I think about so many of the places in our countries that we're experiencing, those roots are in eugenics. And so coming together for this colloquium, bringing together voices from around the world, I see myself as my most important role over these days is to learn from all of you, to be inspired by all of you, to help co-chair with Nora. I mean, to be among such luminaries that have been studying and writing and thinking about eugenics, like Nora, like Patrick, Miros, and Benedict, but also to be here with Beatriz and Benjamín, to know that Sor Juana Inés walked in these hallways, right? We have ancestors that are with us still today, that are inspiring us to leave behind a better world than what we are finding. And so that is our task together. I'm very excited to be kicking this off. I'm here at El Colegio, this historic place that is so important, not just to the people of Mexico, but to the Americas. And grateful to be learning with all of you, getting to learn and meet all of you, and building a community, because that is the antidote to the dangers we are living in right now. It is easy to be afraid, to isolate ourselves, but it is when we most have to be coming together and building not just communities at the local level and within our countries, but at a global level, because that is what the forces that we are up against are organizing and funding across national borders. And so we must also build this global community with a vision that is worthy of us and future generations. Gracias.
So I think we're going to now, if this is okay with you, Patrick, we will show a film and then leave you with the final words before opening it to the crowd, if you're happy with that.
Okay.
So in terms of this film that you're going to see, this is something that my wife, who you will see sort of going around with a camera, she has been conducting lots of different thinking about a global anti-eugenic center, and making sure that, as inspiring as like being in community with a sort of core team is, actually we're really keen on making sure that the steps we take moving forward is a collective effort, is guided by what people sort of have to say, and their sort of ideas and inspirations, and also actually just knowing what is appropriate and what isn't. And so in the last half a year or so, Eula has been capturing different interviews with many of you. With some of you, she's still keen to capture interviews with, because this is very much an ongoing process, and has compiled the following video, which will be played for you now. So, we could, yeah. The question is, do we want to sit down so we can see it? Or, yeah. Or we could turn. Yeah, we're happy to turn. Sorry, you'll see the back of us, but
working on anti-eugenic across the world. I have learned so much from this process, and I am so thankful for the time and passion and the humanity that people have shared. These responses will serve as a critical guide for the building of a global anti-eugenic center and global anti-eugenic work moving forward. As you know, my wonderful children have been with me on this journey, and for this video, my daughter Rosalind is going to be asking the questions.
Eugenics important response for global crises today?
So I think that when we look at today's global crises and the poly crisis, we have so many different issues taking place, economic, climate change, migration, poverty, war. So much of today's crises have their roots in the eugenics work from the last centuries. And many of us don't understand that. And so first is education. It's about being aware of the eugenics strategies and how those strategies have developed the system and the climate and the culture that we are all living in today that have created the conditions for these global crises. And related, we have to be able to come together and build community. I think that eugenics have created the conditions for the authoritarianism and the rise of authoritarianism today, and those thrive on isolation. They thrive on us being siloed and often pitted against each other. And one of my goals is for us to break those silos down and to work transnationally as a humanity for a shared future in which we all have the freedom to thrive and have the freedom to be dignified as human beings.
So, as I see it, and I see this really powerfully over the last 6 months, I see that eugenics is steeply on the rise. And things which were not acceptable before are now becoming acceptable. So it's becoming acceptable for a Labour Party and Labour MPs to express views on migration that would never have been acceptable a year ago. Where this is travelling is that they're now extending out that remit from migration and what one might say ethnicity to disability. And you're getting to the point where it's now acceptable to drive home hard in the area of benefit cuts for disabled people, and also latterly to curtail things like access to work support for disabled people in employment. The consequences of that will be, on the one hand, with PIP, will drive disabled people into poverty, and the consequences of access to work is that it will drive disabled people out of the workforce. The problem with disabled people being driven out of the workforce is that they will then only ever be seen by non-disabled people as people who are not economically productive.
I think that what we are seeing is a resurgence in the kinds of ideas that actually underwrote the eugenics project early in the 20th century. Whether it is, sort of misogynistic ideas being promoted on social media, or the ideas of often, internet billionaires, AI billionaires, who have a sense of who has the right to make decisions and who should just be the passive recipients for those decisions. who's of value in society, who should continue and who should not, what kinds of services should be provided. Eugenics, once again, is no longer hidden, right? It wasn't hidden at the beginning of the 20th century. In the wake of the Second World War, it kind of had to go underground. It's come back full force, and it's out there, and it's being said, and it's the camouflage is gone. And so, because eugenics is so key to the project of shaping the world along hierarchical lines, anti-eugenics similarly is a valuable response to it today.
Anti-eugenics is exactly what we need, precisely because I feel like what we're living through right now just seems like I wish I could say culmination, but it's not over yet, right? Of these kind of just really horribly eugenic logics and policies. And that is like, this is the world we are in right now. I mean, whether it's from thinking about in this country, just, or well, not even just in this country, but thinking about debates around immigration, the way that those are very eugenic arguments. I mean, in COVID, just the casual eugenicism that people would say, oh, well, maybe it's okay if we get rid of, if the weak die out. I mean, it was such sort of nakedly eugenic discourse around the way people were even just thinking about that. And of course, we all know that both in the both locally and globally, that it wasn't like communities were impacted, much greater than others. So yes, but just how easily people kind of seized on that as like, oh, it'll be fine because we'll just get rid of the weak people. And also I think even, it ties into environmental crisis. Again, what does it mean that, the people who are polluting the most, and then there's, the people in the global south are the ones that are suffering the most. And there's a eugenic logic about that too, right? So I don't know. I feel like it's like crucial to everything that's happening right now.
So there's a lot of global crises that sort of touch on anti-eugenics, right? A very clear one is climate change. We're going to see more and more climate refugees and economic refugees moving from the global south into the global north. And unfortunately, you've seen a resurgence of nativist sentiments, right? That sort of work against those refugees or immigrants, anybody who is different, and sort of in trying to establish eugenics policies that will eliminate or in the case of the US, right, deport those migrants back to where they belong, right? So those awful discourses can be very harmful and are very tied to the global sort of contemporary crisis related to immigration, the contemporary crisis related to, right, things like transphobic attacks. Sometimes there are some scholars that have tied that to eugenics discourses, right? Like a lot of the anti-trans policies being passed in the US are specifically sort of targeting people, like trying to eliminate transness, right? So that's something that I really deeply care about as a trans person. And so I think it's really important to sort of realize there's these global crises that are happening, these type of nativism and sort of conservatism regarding gender and sexuality is all tied together. And it's a response to a changing world where it's easy to scapegoat minorities for bigger problems that have to do with capitalism and climate change and things that the humanities is trying to grapple with. But again, it's very easy to scapegoat minorities and use eugenic policies to blame them for for inflation, for example, in the US, right? And unfortunately, that's a very successful political tactic.
I would argue that most of our crises are deeply tied to the resurgence of eugenics. Many people thought that the Human Genome Project would put these ideas to bed, and in fact, it's invited people back into a conversation. And it tends to reinforce this notion that difference is rooted in biology rather than the meaning that is assigned to difference. And so we have to have a better set of intellectual understandings to be able to confront what's happening in the world right now.
So for me, in my work, the crisis of lack of educational opportunities for many, many people around the globe is something that still continues to trouble me. the way that many inequalities are still perpetrated across societies, and the way that people don't get access to a basic education in many parts of the world, are as a result of eugenics discourses and eugenic thinking about learners' potentialities. We still find it acceptable to test, measure and categorise learners, and so it's really important that we still continue to challenge. And an anti-eugenics vision of education offers a way of challenging those discourses.
Oh, we have so many crises around this world. The climate crisis, eugenics is directly connected to that. The poor live in areas that the wealthy no longer want, and they're most often the unseen parts of town, the parts where the story is untold, and where the poor can live in a lot of poverty. And that seems to be the problem with everything. Think about a pyramid in the world. The economy is on the top of the pyramid. They want a good economy, but they're doing it with the destruction of the land that's below. If you flip that and you put the land on the top and the economy on the bottom, it would be much better, because you have to have a healthy land before you can have a healthy economy. And if you don't have a healthy land, you will never have a healthy economy, no matter what you do. And indigenous people around the world know that. They know a key that the land is the birthing place of all living things. And in order for the nation to survive, for the people to survive, they have to take care of the watersheds and the land. They will not survive without that. And so our economy system is mixed up right now. People have to look differently at the land.
But I think that we need to recognize the assaults against people who are very vulnerable, people who don't have much power. That's a very eugenic kind of practice. And so especially when we see things like climate crisis, people having to flee their homelands because there's not enough food, or they're not able to grow food or things like that. They're the vulnerable populations, and so we see the more dominant ones saying, or maybe not saying, but maybe through their policies, saying you don't matter. We only want to protect the strong and the weak. We're just not going to continue to feed them or not really care for them, because that's not what we're here for. Right? Eugenics is about strengthening what they think is the fit aspect of society and letting go the unfit. And so we see that happening across the globe because of all these different, because of wars, because of the violence, and climate change as well as another aspect that's affecting people in so many ways.
Why eugenics is important today, because we've been seeing a lot of forms of crisis around the world, and crisis often makes society accept inequality, inequity as normal. In a crisis, people just thinking about to ask who deserves care first, who is worth saving, and who is too valuable. That is where eugenic logic becomes powerful again. So during this amid of the global crisis, we need to think about all the legacies of eugenics, how logics of eugenics shapes our, the visions.
저는 지금 파시즘과 제국주의, 식민주의가 득세하고 있는데요. 이거는 우생학과 같은 뿌리를 가지고 있다고 생각합니다. 이제는 땅과 자원 수탈을 폭력적으로 벌이면서 전쟁이 빈번하게 벌어지고 있고, 이는 생명에 대한 위계를 강화하고 있습니다. 모든 인간은 동등하다는 유엔 인권 규범이 빛을 잃었는데요. 하지만 차별받는 사람들이 싸워나갈 수 있는 지향과 지침은 여전히 필요합니다. 중요합니다. 반우생학이 그런 역할을 할 수 있다고 생각합니다.
問題ですね。人種であったりとか、性別であったりとか、性自認とか性思考であったりとか、障害とか病の有無であったりとか、年齢であったりとか、貧富の差であったりとかっていう、そういうふうな格差や差別っていうのが、どんどん拡大しているのかなというふうに捉えています。得るために、デザインするという、生命操作っていうのも進められようとしていると。そのことによって、障害や病そのものがあってはならないもの、なくすべきものっていうふうな認識が強められているんじゃないかなというふうに考えています。でも、出生してから発症する病とか、病気ですね、それもあるし、事故によって、被る障害っていうのもなくならないわけで、それにもともと元来、人は様々な心身の多様性を持って生まれてくるものだというふうに思っています。だからこそ、面白いし、いろんな困難を互いに支え合って、共に生きるところに、連帯っていうのが生まれるし、誰もが生きやすい社会になるのではないかなというふうに思っています。そういう意味で、その反優勢の考え方っていうのが非常に今重要だなというふうに考えています。
Eugenics response is very important today because historically eugenics has been so related to racism. And today we are witnessing another new wave of racism, particularly related to anti-immigration. And that also applies to Japan. That's why anti-eugenics is very much, perhaps more important today.
Anti-eugenics being an important response to global crisis today. I think it points to truth-telling around the fact that eugenics initiatives and eugenics policies and practices have not gone anywhere, have not been debunked in the way that people assume that they have not been removed from government policies and the way that I think people think that they have been. So
I think anti-eugenics is fundamental today because historically moments of crisis are fertile ground for losing sight of what should remain our core commitment, which is the intrinsic value of every human life. Crises tend to activate eugenic logics that push societies to decide who deserves to live, where they deserve to live, and under what conditions. These decisions are often framed as necessary, rational, or unavoidable responses to scarcity or risk. We can see this clearly in the treatment of migrants in many countries in the global north, but also in the global south. Migrant lives have been constructed as a central threat. Economic burden, security risk, or demographic problems. This framing justifies policies that expose migrants to precarity, detention, and death, while presenting such outcomes as unfortunate but acceptable. Anti-eugenics is crucial because it challenges these narratives and insists that crisis cannot be used to legitimize the selective protection of life. It demands responses grounded in care, responsibility, and justice, rather than exclusion and disposability.
Anti-eugenics is such an important response to the global crises today. I'm sure that many people are aware that people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who both have roots in South Africa and in Southern Africa, are very influential as part of the new eugenics movement in the United States. And we are working actively in this part of the world to get, to the very root of where these ideas come from. They are not exclusive to the United States or South Africa or other settler colonies. We see them cropping up in the Caribbean, in other African countries, in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, and so on. And we can also see the way in which communities of experts find each other in the world and use social media and a whole range of new 21st century tools to spread these ideas. And that's why we believe that so many global crises in the world today take on some of this powerful eugenic language.
I guess it's an important response because nowadays we're living in a world where unfortunately a lot of these like very far right extremist views are I don't know, like on the rise. And I guess there's a lot of I don't know, like women's rights and civil rights that cost so much to gain that are being like eroded again. So I think it's really important to remember like that that no person or one group is better than others. And
the global crises that are currently happening are oftentimes based in racist thinking, and anti-eugenics again attempts to inform the public of the existence of this way of thinking and to remind the general public that that way of thinking, the eugenics way of thinking, is a pseudoscience and not something that we should be embracing to set policy.
Eugenics is an important response to global crises today because eugenics does have a global reach. I would say I don't really know a place that hasn't dabbled in eugenics, and so we all have a history that we should recognize. And also globally, we're all like most I don't know, most countries are still practicing aspects of eugenics today.
I think anti-eugenics has to be an ongoing response. I think we have now access to different tools of communication that we didn't used to have before. And that opens up a very important opportunity for population across the world, across ages, across languages and realities to engage with narratives that are often very present in our communities that we don't necessarily know others are experiencing as well. I think in the current politics that we live across the world, now more than ever advocating for the protection of human rights, individual rights, society, thinking through the lens of community care, gathering is will continue to be extremely important.
The push for, in all these synonyms that we use right now, our push for efficiency, the rise of artificial intelligence, the political systems that we have, and the rise of kind of new fascism. All of these things are things where a well-articulated, effective anti-eugenics movement, I think, could be a real rallying point for people, and at the same time do some kind of redress by allowing people to let go of old ideas that are really holding us back, that persist and we're not aware are there all the time, that are often eugenic, and also build new things with the freedom that we get from not being saddled by those old systems. Yeah, I think all of that is urgently needed.
I see anti-eugenics as an international unifying movement that diffuses political and social borders by promoting equality, reproductive rights, and exposing historical and contemporary eugenic policies. In our times of rapid technological trade and geopolitical instability and rising nationalism, a global anti-eugenics movement is all the more needed to resist fear and isolationism and learn from the mistakes of the past, to connect us and humanize marginalized groups, and importantly, to keep us hopeful and keep us sane.
Because I think a lot about like little things that we can do, kind of small things that everyone can do on a day-to-day basis, not just kind of big top-down, oh, the government should do this, the UN should do this, or whatever, or the superpowers should get it together, or whatever. But I spend a lot of time thinking about what we can do, you know, in our children and people around us in our communities. Kind of small everyday acts of sovereignty and being better and trying to contribute to making the world a good place. So
we're seeing eugenics at play. We're seeing it used as a colonial instrument. It's undeniable that it is embedded so much within imperialistic and colonial thinking. And if I go back to Moana Jackson and his offerings around eugenics, colonization is inherently eugenic. And so an anti-eugenic response, excuse me, is the most needed response. It's kind of like it's the thing you should do. If anything, that is the first point where you should start, and then just start. So I think that anti-eugenics is an important response. I think it's so needed, but it's the start. It's the start, and we can use that as our placeholder, as our starting point to just keep going.
So we had some wonderful contributions. I will not talk too long and too much because I still have important things to do later in the week, right? But I wanted to bring out a couple of things. First of all, I was very happy with Benjamin introducing the history of this building and the sort of history that comes with it, but also the sort of trying to see that this history has gone and that it needs to be reclaimed and that it needs to be what it really has always been. And that is actually shaping the future. And so I was quite happy with that. And I was also very happy that he brought up the history of the Institute of 17 connected with blind photographers. And, you know, it's about what I learned about that, and this is 25 years ago. Today, he said, it's working with our impossibility. And it's kind of like starting, blind people cannot see, so what's the use of taking photographs? But if you understand photography, and if you understand what lenses do and what materiality does to create an image, you can actually compose, being blind, you can compose that image, and you know that I have this image, I have it. So I actually have something that actually, if you look at it in a logical way, you cannot have, but because you're blind, you cannot see. And so I think today that's so wonderful with the situation that we're in today, with global crisis, with many crises, and with the impossibility almost to do something about it. And so I think that's where shaping the future and also building community and hope really comes in. And so I really would like to congratulate this project that is starting small beginnings, and that probably could come up with something really big. I want to talk a little bit about eugenics. because, you know, if you look at it just at the word eugenic, good genes, who would not want that, you know? And so it seems like it's something like natural, so that if we try to find a good partner, you know, and so forth, and to create or to sort of to go in that sense. But the problem is that, you know, the ideas that go together with it is that it becomes connected with an incredible violence to people. You know, if we see that all kinds of minorities, and it seems like everybody, you know, sort of fits in that category, being a woman, being disabled, being an immigrant, being whatever. I think we almost all fit into that. And so, so then this I think it's this violence, and so racism is exactly a violence towards other people, not respecting them. And so so I think indeed, as many people have said, that you know, what is the antidote against this violence, which is now so globalized, you know, through so many political systems and crises that are throughout the world. So I think anti-eugenics, you know, is I have a little bit of a problem with the anti, because, you know, I think eugenics, yeah, of course everybody wants that. So, but the anti is, of course, anti the violence and all the consequences that are connected to that, you know, whether it comes in forms of racism, exclusion, and so forth. But the thing is that I think there are a number of things that are possible, and I think I'm a scientist, and I believe in knowledge, in creating knowledge, and I believe that the system of knowledge creation, you know, the great system of universities, that is a system that should always be ready to correct itself. And so, for example, with my discipline, anthropology or biology or history, those have worked very much with the whole development of ideas that led to Nazism and so forth. Nazism and fascism was something that was very scientifically supported. And so I think we have to be ready as knowledge creators to correct and to correct and to educate our students about this. And I was also very happy with the idea of curation, in the sense that, you know, that, and that's very much part of the system of 17, is to develop a system of dialogue, of conversation, so that we can we can listen and be listened to, and we can able to grow and develop and correct ourselves as well. So I think that's very important. I think probably I will leave it with that. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Patrick, y gracias también por pues el video que acabamos de ver con todas las opiniones, y pues fue bonito ver las caras en la pantalla y haber reconocido algunas aquí, ¿no? Vamos a abrir el espacio para quienes tengan preguntas. Antes de eso, por favor, quisiera
answers and questions. Also, there's people who are following us through YouTube, telling these people in YouTube, we are transmitting on one channel in Spanish and in another channel in English. So for those of you who would like to share the link, because all of the colloquium is going to be shared this way in Spanish and English. So let us know if you need the link. And for those of us who are following us, please be patient with the technical issues, because sometimes there can be delays in the transmission, but we're doing the best possible here with the technical help, and with our interpreter we are doing the best we can to convey interpretation through YouTube. So we are now going to open the space for questions and answers. Thank you. I'm going to make my question in Spanish, but I feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish. You can answer in English, no problem. My question, I'm going to give some context for my question. Normally, a group, well, when we have two separate positions, one eugenic group and then we have another group which is anti-eugenics, and I think that this could create an impossibility of communication from one group to another. Maybe it will be relevant to have a dialogue between these two groups if we want to move forward, right? In order to, I mean, just to place a situation. Today we are, I guess, on one side and we are listening to a video that represents what we believe. And I think it will be interesting to find a way, a path, a bridge of some sort, in order to reach some peace, so to speak, or to find bridges. And those of us who have worked with communities where there are conflicts, we understand perfectly that locating these people who are the bridge is fundamental in order to create another type of paths. So my question is, if you in your organization or in your areas of study, have you found any failures, so to speak, fails of the system, where in order to create these links of communication or bridges of communication, and if you can found or if you have found these bridges of communication, what was the strategy in order to create those bridges? Okay, we will take maybe a couple of questions, and 3 questions, and then we will answer in blocks. So any other question? Well, if not, then we can move into the answer.
More strategies for bringing people that perhaps we wouldn't normally try to bring into these conversations. I think when thinking about eugenics and anti-eugenics, I feel like what has been core at the start of this project and throughout is that there may be people that we definitely want to sort of disassociate ourselves with and feel like they may be causing a bigger issue around eugenics than other people. But actually, I don't think there are two sides. I think that eugenics is something that can appeal to everybody. And I think likewise, anti-eugenics is something that can appeal to everybody. I think when you look at eugenics today and this resurgence of eugenics, you have certain figures, like, I don't need to sort of name them, but there's definitely certain figures which have big characters and big media presences and big positions of power that are pushing certain agendas. But I think much more dangerous than those particular people is the popularity of eugenics today. It's the fact that certain people are as undemocratic as some of the things that they might be sort of talking about, they are still getting voted in by a good percentage of the population. And so I think when thinking about eugenics and anti-eugenics, it's very dangerous to think about two sides, but rather think about how do we bring these people that at the moment are very attracted to these eugenic ideas, how do we actually sell to them the idea of anti-eugenics? And then how do we bring them in and make sure that they are a part of our path moving forward? There are certain groups of people that obviously we want to sort of engage more. We do try to bring in different voices, different opinions around this, but I think because we always have that mindset, I think it means that actually we feel this is open for everyone. I don't know if you...
Muy buena pregunta, ¿verdad? Es algo en lo que he estado pensando
An
bastante.
amazing question. I was thinking about it a lot, this anti and the eugenics, like two groups. I think that one of the benefits of this idea is that this affects all of us. You can be anti-immigrant, but maybe you have some capabilities or disabilities that can make you victim of eugenics. Maybe you're a trans person that is anti-black or anti-indigenous people. So it's eugenics really affects you, but at the same time you're affecting other people. So I think that we, all of us, one way or another, we are being affected by eugenics. In the United States, one of the things that I'm starting this year is what I called in English courageous conversations. That is, bring together people with different perspectives, sometimes even within the same family, people who voted somehow in a way that has affected negatively their own family people, their own parents or their own family, just because they believed what they heard on the media. So these bridges, I don't think that we cannot give the luck. We cannot be indulgent with ourselves and stop talking. During peace processes, we understand the importance, but right now, in our global objectives, the idea is creating a more inclusive and balanced world. We need to include the people who think differently. I would like to insist on this idea of listening. Why? Because thanks to Marielena and what she said, it's easy to understand or to listening to one another if we believe or we're within the same framework. But the moment we face what other people is thinking, but what the otherness is thinking, it can be tough. It means that we have to question ourselves too. And the proposal that we have had in 17 Institute is to implement a listening device that can help us to sit together and listening to different perspectives. The previous colloquium of 17 Institute was quite demanding because we were able to sit at the table people who were in very different positions regarding the Palestinian and Israeli conflict, regarding migration, regarding the trends right and left, well, right wing, left wing. So being able to develop these listening strategies is essential right now, I believe. And this demands a self-reflection, the openness to self-reflect. And it also means that we need to be willing to understand our own rejections, our own, or even accept that we are not ready for the dialogue. So what to do in order to prepare ourselves to have those kinds of dialogues. Bueno, voy a hacer mi pregunta.
Panel to
to all the contributions and for giving us the opportunity to start listening and thinking about this. And I guess maybe following up a little bit on the previous question, I was thinking about sort of the importance of bringing in all of these different threads of people who have been and are affected by eugenics. So it could be communities of disabled people, people who have been affected by anti-immigration policy, so many people who are affected by racism on a global level. And the ways, I mean, it's complicated in the sense that, sometimes members of those groups don't feel an affiliation or a connection with those in the other. And in the sort of the realm of disability studies and sort of critical race theory, there's kind of a long history, right, of sometimes wanting to build alliances and sometimes finding those separations. But I guess thinking about that, I've kind of been contemplating a lot this image of the eugenics tree, right, as maybe many of us have because of the poster, and I really like the way sort of the vegetation is taking over that tree. But I guess I'm wondering what other people think about this tree, because in a way it annoys me that the original eugenicists used a tree, because now we can't have the tree, right? Like the tree is so powerful with all of its roots bringing together, well, for the eugenicists it was all the different disciplines, with anthropology and statistics and genomics and genetics, medicine, biology, all of these different sciences, education, health. Right, and so it seems that the tree is very powerful, and who doesn't want more trees and more roots and sprouts bringing everybody together? But now I wonder, what do we do with this tree that should be bringing us together, but then seems to evoke this very sort of stark and dangerous history? So I guess I'm wondering what people think about, how do we bring all of those different roots together, but then also deal with this kind of mixed bag historical tree.
This is a perfect segue to so in if you go onto the From Small Beginnings site, you'll see another reinterpretation of the tree, a anti-eugenic tree by Judy Dow, who we're thrilled to be here today. And I think what this tree does, and likewise I think with the vegetation taking over the tree and the poster for this colloquium as well, is it's reclaiming this image of the tree, because as you say, it is very annoying that eugenicists a century ago decided tree was their symbol, because tree stands for so much that I think we stand for. And I think what is really core, and it's a sort of element around the question of the tree and the image of the tree, but actually it's a much bigger question, is not letting eugenics and eugenicists claim certain symbolism or claim certain language or claim certain narratives as their own, but actually making sure that just because they have started to use or have been using for over a century in this case, but also when thinking about certain language which is used by people that we imagine would be sort of pro-eugenic around the Roe versus Wade decision and all these other components, they're using the language that actually we should be claiming as our own. And I think to try to avoid using that language because eugenicists are using it, or to avoid using that symbolism because eugenicists are using it, I think we're handing over the playing field to them, basically. So I think trying to not be scared of an image such as around a tree, but actually how do we reclaim that image as our own, I think is a really core sort of mission. So,
yeah, maybe I think if you think about this image of the tree, which stands for life, the Nazi politicians, used that, and they wanted a fit body, and they wanted more room to live, and they wanted all of these things that propagate life. The problem was that they saw at a certain time that they could not achieve this unless they would exclude and kill other people, you know, and that's the problem. And so I think we can, of course, we want to claim. I think disabled people want to claim life. I mean, you know, and so many people want to claim life. So I think that's very important. Another thing that I was thinking about and that we haven't talked about so far, that we haven't talked much so far, is the role of technology in all of this, because you know the technological imaginary creates that, you know, we can achieve certain things, you know, that maybe we couldn't achieve before, and so it creates some kind of promise, you know, that it usually doesn't fulfill, and so you know, with so many things, technology actually thinks that, you know, we don't need community. And it really doesn't achieve this. And so I think we kind of have to go two ways, because on the one hand we need technology, and I think we need to also apply it. So somebody in the film was saying that, okay, we have prenatal testing that will take out, you know, all the disabilities like Down syndrome and so forth in the future, and we will not see them in the future. Right? And so then we have all kinds of problems of people that don't want to use this technology and so forth. But she was also saying that we will still have disabilities. So it leads us into very complicated discussions in terms of, you know, should we avoid technology altogether? I think it's impossible, because this technology is coming our way, and particularly when it comes to genetics. You know, now we are talking about genetic editing, you know, where genetic editing can be happening in fetus or in neonatal children. So, you know, do we want to apply that? Do we want to use that and so forth to create, you know, a better human, for whatever that may mean? So I think technology is a very, very difficult one that we need to tackle. And then the last thing that I want to say is that I think we have to be occupied again with what is human and how we define the human. You know, I had a course on culture and disability for a long time. And then I was thinking I was moving anthropology along in a field and teaching the anthropology of disability and so forth. And the last few years, I changed that course to a course which was called post-human anthropology. And of course, that's a contradiction in itself, because anthropology is about humans. So how would you then know? But I did not mean, you know, post-human in the sense of we're not going to be talking about the human anymore, but we're going to be talking about a different kind of human. You know, the sort of the human that has taken a too central place, that is too connected to this, that has been too technologized in a way. I think it was an argument for decentering the human, you know, to make place for other non-human entities that we have to relate to and so forth. So anyway, I think the discussion about technology and the human is a very important one.
Go on.
I actually wanted to jump back, if I could, a minute to the conversation about conversation, right? About courageous conversations, excuse me, and listening, which absolutely most important, and then also the self-reflection that causes. But I wonder if we might also think about the next step, right? Which it seems to me is at least about being willing to be changed ourselves, and being willing to be out there about that. And part of that is that I think as our anti-eugenics movement grows, I think we're going to get more and more cognizant of the fact that we aren't all the same. Like, we aren't all agreeing on what justice means. We aren't all agreeing on what human dignity means or the common good means, but we need to have those conversations. And if we're going to be a political or anything else movement that's going to be effective, we're going to have to come to some kinds of agreements, even if we don't always agree. We're going to have to come to some kind of political agreements on things. So there's more than, part of it, I think, in my own community is frustrated by the conversation around conversation, and as somehow as if that's enough. And I just want to be clear that I think it's not, but I'm curious what else you all think needs to be in there. Thank you.
Perdón, solo decirles que sean muy breves porque tenemos ya 8 minutitos nada más.
Sí. Mi pregunta tiene que ver en estos dos tipos de
with these two types of perspectives and cultural practices, the eugenics perspective and non-eugenics. And my question is, this linguistic expression, in order to create these bridges and these ways of listening, the question is, how can we change these languages or these expressions, these linguistic expressions that separate instead of bringing together? Hola.
Get to be 72 years old, you kind of lose your filter a little bit. So I apologize before I say anything. I have been trying very hard to listen. And as the survivor of a family that was targeted, where 623 people were institutionalized, many sterilized, I come from a very different perspective. As an Indigenous person, I come from a very different perspective. And many Indigenous people, good genes is not something everybody wants. A disability or a defect of some kind is a gift. It's a teaching moment. It's a lesson to be learned. The most wonderful children I've ever worked with were those who had Down syndrome. And I think that perspective has to be considered. And it's when listening doesn't work anymore and actions take over, it's problematic. And the roots of the tree of what I was raised with, the 5 R's, we have responsibility to develop relationships, to show respect and reverence and reciprocity. And those are the roots that should be brought forward in looking for new models, for looking for a way to not let listening jump to actions that are harmful. Thank you.
Dovetailing with that, I think very important comment. I wanted to add a step to the question of the tree and the question of technology, because the problem is not the tree itself, but the ideal representation of a tree that doesn't get sick, that has nothing wrong with it. And likewise with technology, we had a very interesting discussion about this a couple of days ago. I mean, technology also fucks up, right? It hallucinates, it lies, it concocts weird connections, it breaks down. And imagine those kinds of consequences with genetic editing and high-tech, God knows what, choosing your children's color of the eyes gone wrong. And we're going to face like really challenging stuff coming out of this sort of idealization of technology and so on. So I think the discussion simply carries on because to draw a rather clumsy metaphor, but to make things clear, technology also faces disability. And therefore, we'll have a lot of work to do. And the point is really to de-idealize both the tree and technology and to take things to, the real stuff which is happens, and will go on happening, and how we pick up the pieces.
Me da mucha pena dejar con las preguntas que se quedaron, pero podemos...
We can speak later on because we have to connect for the next session that is in a half an hour. So let's be patient. We are transmitting in two separate channels. So we have to do a lot of stuff in the background. So thank you so much for this amazing session. I think it was a really good beginning. A generous beginning, and let us continue the conversation here in the room or in other places, and we will see you back at 12. And thanks for all the people in the panel.